Hi, everyone. So today's webinar partner session is going to be on Vue.js from the backend, building a robust front end to complement your backend with Cassidy Williams. My name is Tiffany, and I'm a developer advocacy lead here at Shopify. And today's speaker is Cassidy Williams. She's a senior software engineer at L4 Digital in Seattle. She graduated with a computer science degree from Iowa State University and has had the honor of working with various organizations, including HackerFund as their director of outreach. She's active in the developer community and one of Glamour magazine's 35 Women Under 35 Changing the Tech Industry, as well as LinkedIn's Top Professionals 35 and Under. As an avid speaker, Cassidy has participated in meetups and events, including the Grace Hopper Celebration for Women in Computing, South by Southwest, a National Center for Women, and IT Summit. Thanks so much, Cassidy, for joining us today. We're really looking forward to this this talk on Vue.js. And with that, I'll pass it on to you. One thing that I do want to mention to everybody just before we get started is that today's recording will be, or today's webinar will be recorded. And so if you drop your connection or you can't hear anything for whatever reason, you will get an email within the week with the recording.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Vue.js from the backend. Again, my name is Cassidy Williams, and we're going to be talking about building a robust front end to complement your backend. That was meant to be a joke. Okay. So again, my name is Cassidy Williams. I'm at Cassidy on Twitter, GitHub, CodePen, and a bunch of others. And so if you look up Cassidy, that's me, and feel free to tweet me throughout this event and afterwards, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that aren't answered here. So you know about me, but who are you? I'm going to be giving this talk as if you're a backend dev who's just sick and tired of server-side rendering, but doesn't know necessarily how to go about the client side of things. Or if you just want to learn about Vue.js, I'll be going over that too. But let's just dive in and get started into Vue. So first, why client-side rendering? Now, client-side rendering is something that's definitely much more common now than it used to be. Server-side rendering used to be the big deal. But what's great about it is, first of all, client-side rendering avoids unnecessary requests when only a portion of the page has changed. And so that full page reload isn't required every time something changes on the back end in some way. Interactions overall are just easier to maintain, and they're better supported with client-side rendering. And so when you handle animations and all kinds of just pretty things on the client side, you don't have to worry about the backend as you're working on these rich interactions, and you don't have to send different events from the backend to necessarily trigger those kinds of animations. You don't need to post more and more as different assets on the page are loaded because, again, you don't, a full page reload isn't required, and you can kind of group different calls together. You don't need a giant monolithic build to deploy something. You can build piece by piece, and so that ease of deployment is great. And data access and business logic are kept out of the user interface programmatically. So the backends can be more service-oriented, aka APIs, as the UI makes calls to the service rather than directly to the database. And then you can also use the same code base across platforms. And so if you were making a few different user interfaces here and there for the web, and then you wanted to make a user interface for mobile and desktop and all kinds of stuff, you could use the same backend that way too. So that separation of concerns goes beyond just client-side rendering for the web. It goes across all types of development, and that separation is very huge and key to client-side rendering. Now, what is Vue.js? It is, in summary, a library for building interactive web interfaces. And the creator of Vue.js said, I figured, what if I could just extract the part that I really liked about Angular and build something really lightweight without all the extra concepts involved? And Vue.js is really lightweight and very similar to Angular and React. And so this is kind of the official story of it, but I have a more fun story. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Pride and Prejudice. That is one of my favorite movies. But we have both sides. We have the React side that has JSX and the virtual DOM and all of these different components. And then we also have the Angular side that has templates and directives, and they just don't like each other. But then over time, from their love, Vue.js is born. Woo! I'm gonna pause here because I'm assuming you're laughing hysterically. Ha 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 ha. Okay. Anyway, so that is my funny story of why Vue.js exists. I think of it as React and Angular had a beautiful baby, and that's how it began. Now, why Vue.js? First of all, it's small. Compared to Angular and React, it is just much smaller. And it's also just JavaScript, if you want it to be. Now, you can argue that other frameworks are also just JavaScript, but with Vue, you don't have to deal with TypeScript or JSX or anything if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to. It's very easy to set up. They have a lot of beginning templates, so you can just do a view init and just get right going, which I'll show you in a second. And also the errors are explicit. Now, I want to focus on that for just a second because a lot of times when you're developing with a React or an Angular or a Backbone or an Ember, all of these different frameworks, you kind of get a very generic JavaScript error saying like, this is undefined, or something doesn't exist, or just some error was thrown, and you don't necessarily know where that comes from, and you kind of have to throw a debugger in there or just throw a bunch of console logs all over the place so that way you can figure out where the errors are coming from. With Vue, the errors are so explicit. When I first started getting going with it, I didn't actually need to look at the documentation at all when I was setting up. The errors were so explicit, I was able to just continue building my application because they said exactly what the problem was, generally how to fix it, or exactly what I had to look up to figure out how to fix it. And so I think explicit errors are kind of the key to a really successful framework, in my opinion. And so that's what I really love about Vue.js. But why tell you all of this when I can show you? So today I want to build a application that pulls from the GitHub API and just reads user data about a different user on GitHub. And so let's get started. I'm going to do some live coding for you here. And so the first thing that I'm going to want to do is install the Vue CLI. And this is pretty quick. You just do npm install and then globally, and then it's Vue CLI. And then if you happen to have it on your computer and have an old version, this also updates the CLI as well. And this comes with all kinds of great tools. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Vue init, which starts a new Vue project. And I'm going to do Webpack, which is one of their starter projects that you can do in there. And it handles all kinds of like live reloading and things like that. And I'm just going to call this GitHub user search, let's say. Okay, and so it's going to start this. We're going to just call it GitHub user search. It's a GitHub Vue project, let's say. It's made by me, and you can choose these different Vue builds. There's, you know, different templates, different advantages for them. I'm just going to go with the default. I am going to install the router. I don't need ESLint right now. I won't do testing, none of that. Okay, great. So this started my Vue.js project. Pretty straightforward, right? So I'm going to go to the GitHub user search, and then I'm going to do npm install. See how explicit that is? That's so great. And I'm just going to install all of the libraries that Vue says I should have to get this started. At this part, I'm going to insert some puns like, I hope you're enjoying the Vue, and things like that. I'll come up with some better ones. And then once we're all set, I'm going to do npm run dev. Then, assuming everything goes well, it starts a dev server, and woohoo, we have a live Vue.js app. That's great. Okay, so now let's actually break this down. I'll explain what's happening under the hood, and we'll work with it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to that. So I'm keeping my server in one tab and opening up here. You can ignore my drag in there. Okay, so let's open up Vim and look at what's happening under the hood. So, as in most web applications, you have an index.html, and the entire web application actually lives in this one div here called app. And yeah, you can actually stick in like hello right there, and then that would actually change. That would just put the entire app below a word that says hello. I'm not going to show that to you. I'm sure you believe me. But if you were to build a very standalone Vue app within a larger web application, you can totally do it by making it just live inside this one app div. And so if you're kind of at your company and you're trying to figure out how to add a certain feature, but you don't want to use some existing tools, if you wanted to use Vue, you could just have your company give you a nice little div inside your monolithic web application, and you can make Vue work for you right there. So woohoo, that's great. We also have a package.json, which has all of the different libraries that Vue gave us, which does look like a lot, but it's all very useful. And yeah, that's great. So now let's actually look at what's happening here. So main.js. Main.js is obviously the main JavaScript. And you'll notice that, oh, didn't mean to do that. It imports Vue, it imports app, which I'll talk about in a second, and it imports the router. So this is the entire Vue application. It gets the app element, which again, we have that one div on the index.js page. We have the router, which we installed that in the initialization of the project. And the router uses this app template, and it pulls this app component. And again, app is right here, and this is the component. So this is a Vue.js file. A Vue.js file always includes a template, a script, and a style. And that will always be there. That is always what a Vue template is. And so in this Vue template, we have a router view. We have a router view and the image, which is the logo. And so you can see we have this logo here. This is going to be the router view right here. And it exports the name of this as app. I usually keep the name the same name as the component. I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but it's always good to have. And then these are the styles for that. Now, in Vue, when you have style here, this is a global style. But if you wanted to be just specific to the component, you just add scoped, and then that style ends up being specific to the component. I think this is fine here, so now I'll go into the router. So in the router, we have, again, it imports Vue, it imports the router from Vue router, and then we have our components, which I'm going to go look at the hello world component in a second. So we're telling Vue to use the router, and then in the routes, it just has the one route, and it's the hello world component. And so if we look down here, I'm going to keep the router up there so you can see what we're using. This is the template for the Vue component. Now I'm going to kill some of this so that way you can see how this has changed. So if I do that and go back to the page, oh, all the essential links have gone. That's because I deleted them. But again, that is what this component is. And it is just, again, being pulled in the router here. So I'm going to exit out of the router for a second. Now you'll also notice that it uses templating, very similar to other frameworks. So this message right here comes from the message right here in data. And if I wanted to say, instead of welcome to your Vue.js app, I'm just welcome to your Vue app. If I do that, that actually does change that H1 component right there. And again, oh, look, Vue added this little note for us. So the scoped attribute limits the CSS to a certain component, otherwise it's global. So that's pretty nice. Now, really quick, let's actually use that router and make a new route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new route, and we're going to go global, people, and we're going to go to Spain. And so we're going to have a component, hola, and this is going to be hola mundo, and that's going to be VS. All right, so let's actually make a new component. So I'm going to do this. This is just my Vim syntax on how I make a new file. Hola mundo.vue. And then in here, I'm just going to copy, because I'm a cheater, copy that in here. And then inside this, I'm going to say this is a class hola. I'm going to call this hola mundo. And then in here, I'm going to say, bienvenidos a Vue. Yay, okay. So this is Vue. Oh, I suppose I can style this. It's okay. I don't need to style it differently. I'm just going to show it to you. So now that we have all of this in there and we refresh the page, ooh, something broke. Let's find out what it was. Oh, you know what it is? I didn't import Olamundo into the router. There we go. Olamundo. And then Olamundo. Okay. Doing it live, people. All right. Now we've got welcome to your Vue.js app. And then if I go to ES, bienvenidos a Vue. Yay. And so if I wanted to actually link to each other, I don't have to do anything crazy. Ooh, my Vim is freaking out on me. There we go. Now, unlike React router, where I need to add some kind of link component to be able to link between pages and use the router, I can just use a regular A component right here, and a href, and then let's see, I think that was, yep, that has a little hash in there. So I'm gonna do that. Yes. All right. Hopefully that works. We'll see. And we'll say go to. Oh wait. This one is just on Olamundo. I'm going to say go to English. Okay. Do that. And then in here, go to English. Wow, and that goes back. And then obviously I can link to the ES page. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to restart them because for some reason it is geeking out on me. Cool. So generally you know now how to link between pages and how to use the router. Again, very straightforward. It's pretty explicit how that is done. And so after showing you this link here, go to Spain. After showing you this, I'm going to show you some cooler things. Okay, cool. Go to Spain, go to English. Wow, we are just flying between these pages. This is thrilling. Okay, cool. Now let's do something a little more interesting. Let's actually make a counter because I want to show you some cool things relating to counting. So let's just say that we have a button and we want the button to make a count go up every time you click that button. So first, I'm going to add a new data attribute here, and I'm going to say count, and it's going to start at 0. And then what I want to do is when I click the button, it will increase the count. Increase the count. And we're going to display the count here. So div/div, and then in here, count. So just like message above, count will be displayed here. So if I go over here, this doesn't do anything, but that number is there, so that's great. So what I can do is add a nice little directive here, very similar to Angular, and do v on. So on is the thing that's waiting for an event, and on click. So on click, we're going to do count plus plus. Now, if I save that and go here, then we increase the count. Wow, this increases the count. That's insane. So that's really simple, right? You can just, again, listen for the click event, count plus plus, that attaches to count, boom, and that increases the count. Man, what a day. I love this. Okay, so now that I've shown you some very basic stuff, let's actually get into the meat of what we want to do, and we wanted to search for GitHub users. So I'm going to create a brand new component, so src components, and we'll just call it GitHub, github.vue. I'm going to save that really quick and refresh in there. Cool, it exists. Also, I'm going to be a dirty cheater again and copy all of that in there because who wants to reinvent the wheel? I don't. Now, let's see. Okay, so this is going to be my GitHub component. This is all change in there. GitHub. Okay, and what we're going to do is call this just GitHub search. And I'm going to take out this count because we don't need that anymore. And now let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form. And in this form, we're going to have a nice little input element. And then type equals text. And we'll have placeholder text to be just GitHub username. All right. And I'll leave it at that for now. So we have this form with the input type GitHub username. And before I forget, I'm actually going to stick GitHub into the router here, so that way we can actually see it. So really quick, GitHub, and then GitHub. Okay. And you know what? I'll just take this out. So that way this is on our homepage. We're killing off hello world. Okay. So let's see what happens. Great. So now we have GitHub search, and then we have that GitHub username input box here. But it does nothing. So let's make it do some more things. Now, what I can do is make the form wait for a submit. And that is a very similar thing that we did before. It's just v on, and now it's waiting for the submit event. And if you wanted to prevent defaults, so that way when you hit enter, the page doesn't completely refresh, you can just add prevent. Wow, that's it. And we're going to have a function be called when that happens, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, and so what we want to do is after we input things in here, we are going to make a query. So first I'm going to, okay, let's make that query function first. Now, in Vue, when you want to have certain methods attached to a function, you just add methods. Wow, that's it. So simple. Okay, and it's going to be an object, and the object will be filled with methods. So our method is just going to be query GitHub, and it'll take in a queue. I'll do it without the queue first, just so that way we can get a base case going. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the fetch API. And fetch, I'm going to, let's see, I actually memorized this for the purpose of this event. Okay, api.github.com/users. And I'm just going to do my username first, and we'll add another query later that can toggle multiple people. Okay, and then once we call fetch, we're going to take that result, J, and that's going to be JSON that we need to actually use. And so fetch actually returns a response object. Not sure if any of you know that out there. And so from that response object, we actually need the JSON from it. So we're going to call j.json. Okay, great. That gets our JSON. And then from there, we're going to call then again, and we're actually going to send that over to Vue. So we're going to take that response object, R, do another one of those nice little arrow functions. And then inside that, we're going to, first I'll console.log it, so that way we make sure that we're actually getting it, and R. Let's do that first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call query GitHub from here. Query GitHub. All right, so now, right now, all it does is it'll call query GitHub when I hit enter on the form, but it's something. So let's query GitHub. Did we get a response? Oh man, it's undefined. Okay, let's see what we missed. Okay, so we called fetch. We got the GitHub API. Got j.json. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I just called j.json, but I didn't actually return it. That's a problem. Okay, so now, assuming that everything goes well, let's type anything. Great. So if you open up your console there, which by the way, if you're on a Mac, it's Command Option J, or on Windows, it's I think Control Option or Control Windows J, something like that. You'll figure it out. Anyway, we get all of this information about my GitHub profile. Woohoo! So exciting. Okay, now let's actually use and parse that data. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is instead of just logging it, I'm going to assign it to a property here called results. In data, I'm going to have a results object, and I'm just going to have it start as null. And if we want to actually print results, we should go up here into the template, create a div, and I'm just going to call this div class equals results for now. And then what I want to do is I'll actually add a nice little directive here called v-if. And that means that if results exists, or if some condition occurs, then this div will actually appear. So I'm just going to make if results exists, then this div is going to appear. Cool. And at this point, I'm just going to say results to make it print on the page. Cool. So again, I'll close out this router so you can see the screen better. So in this template, we're getting results from here, and we're going to assign results here. So because I'm nervous about scoping errors, let's do the let self is this. And then we're going to do self dot results equals R. Okay, so fingers crossed. Ooh, what did I mess up? Let is a reserved word. Oh, it's because I didn't put it inside the actual function. Oops, happens. Doing it live, people. Okay, cool. Now when I refresh the page, do this. Wow, now we get this actually appearing on the page. I don't even need this console, but I'll keep it up anyway because it makes me nervous. Cool, so we have that going. Now let's actually do something with those results. Let's parse them. So in parsing the results, sometimes there's some weird funky things that you might need to do. And so that's where I come into play and to tell you about them. So let's just say that we want to have an image and we want the image source to be that results.avatar URL, results.avatar URL. You can't do that. So I typed this here to say not everything is all easy and fun in games, but it's not too difficult. So what you need to do is you actually need to do a v.bind, and you need to bind src, or the source, to the results, or bind src to the object, and then you can do results.avatar URL. Great. So hopefully when we do this, wow, that's my face. That's insane. Cool. So that's how you actually do that. And you know what? I'm going to add a quick style, and I'm going to make the image, let's see, results image. I'm going to make that float left. So the image can be on the side there. So when I do that again, wow, look, it's on the side. So cool. And if you noticed, I didn't actually, when I refreshed the styles, it refreshed the styles without me needing to refresh the page, and it kept everything simple. I love that library loading. Great. Okay, so now that we've almost finished parsing all of those, let's see, I'm going to add a few other things just to kind of make this pop. So let's do an H2 with the name of the person, results.name. Let's see, what were some other properties in there? It had location. Oh, and it had a bio. Let's do the bio first. Results.bio. And then another one, results.location. Okay, cool. So let's just make sure that that worked in there. We do all of this. Wow, look at that, a bio and a location. Crazy. We're going to have to get rid of this results though, because that is not pretty. Now, let's do one more, or I'll do three more, because I want to show off a couple things. Now, if we want to do a results.followers, so followers, it's just followers. It might be followers count, but we'll see. Followers and then following. Now, you might be wondering, why is she showing us this? She's just trying to show off how many people are following her. That is not true, because there aren't that many. But what I want to show is that there comes a problem where if, for example, something doesn't exist here, that followers div will still appear. And so we want to get rid of that. And oh, I'm also going to do a link to someone's blog if they have a website on there. So really quick, this is very similar to the images. We need to do v-bind and href, and then results.blog. Great. Okay, and go to website. Cool. So if I do that, go in here. Wow, look at that. So many things all at once. Amazing. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I'm going to make it not just search me, because nobody wants to just search me, right? Right? Hey, this is weird talking just to an empty void. I really hope you all can hear me, because that would be really unfortunate if not. Okay, Q for our query, and then I'm just going to append this to the end of the URL down here. So this pulls in whatever username here is stuck in the query. And so we might have to deal with some usernames not existing. We'll deal with that in a second. So when we go here now, if I type Cassidy, wow, that is not who I am. Something's not going well. What did I mess up? Property or method query is not defined on the instance. You know why? Because I stuck query in there, but where's query come from? Who knows? We need to actually attach query to that input. Okay, so when we want to attach query to the input, we actually do another directive called v.model. And v.model attaches query to it. And also, we should add query to our data here. And right now, query will be nothing. Great. So now we're going to have this data object attached here to this model here, and it's going to call that in there. So now if I refresh, that's me. And let's see. That's Joe. Wait a minute. Joe doesn't have a website on there. That just goes to my local post. We need to fix that. Okay. And he also doesn't have a name. Oh man. So when someone doesn't have their full GitHub profile all set out, you don't want to have a go-to website here if the website doesn't actually exist. So we're going to use our trusty v-if, and then in v-if, we're just going to say if v-if results.blog. So that means if v-if exists, you show it. If it doesn't, you don't. Great. And now I can do a really random username that doesn't exist. Oh, but now followers and following also doesn't exist. Okay, so let's also do v-if, and then we'll do the same thing with results.followers, and then v-if results.following. Great, so now if these properties don't actually exist, they won't show up. Gone. And I won't do it up here, but it's just repetitive. You can add the v-if to all of these different ones if you want to. Great. But if a user doesn't exist, we do get this error down here in the console, a message that says that the user is not found. And so what we can do is we can add a little not found error down here, so that way that shows up. And I don't think results.message actually exists if the user does exist. So I'm just going to stick that in there, and hopefully that works. And okay, now that I've refreshed the page, first I'll do quick test. Oh, I'll do my sister. Hi, Jamie. Cool. She exists. It has all of this information. Great. And notice how she doesn't have a website, so it doesn't show up. But if I go a little nuts here, now we get not found. Woohoo! We have a completely working GitHub search engine. And if you'll notice, we do have this giant Vue logo here. We can take that out if we wanted to. If you'll recall, that comes from the, not the main.js file, the app.vue file. This is what that is. Let's take that out there just to kind of save some space. Great, now we have GitHub search there. And then I noticed that the picture was really far off to the side. This is just me getting nitpicky now. But let's say that we want results to have a margin of 10 pixels, and then let's just say 150 pixels just for kicks. Great, so now if I type my name again, woohoo! All right, so there you have it. We officially have a nice little GitHub search engine for searching for users on GitHub. And that's generally Vue.js. That's all I really wanted to cover with you today. And I would like to know if you have any questions and if this was helpful for you. And yeah, I would love to hear back from you right now.
Thanks so much, Cassidy. So we have a few questions. First of all, there was one from Eric. He wants to know about the hashtag in the URLs and like in the URLs that you're using. If you could explain that a little bit more and
Sure.
how we would possibly remove that, or like if there's a way of.
So if I'm being honest, I think that that's just the Vue router default. I know that there is a way to get rid of it, but I personally don't know it off the top of my head, if I'm being honest, but there is a way to get rid of it. That's just the Vue router default. Yeah, I'm sorry if that might not be helpful. I think it has to do with the way the page, the way the single page router is set up. But again, I know that can be removed, but off the top of my head, I don't remember it. I'm sorry, I can find it and tweet it out after this talk, for sure.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, and then a lot of people were very impressed by your Vim setup. Could you talk to a little bit about like what tooling you're using and that kind of thing to like get it to look the way that it does?
I'm actually going to do a nice little shameless plug for my Vim setup. If you go to my GitHub, again, Cassidy/Vim-up, this is my entire Vim setup. I've worked really hard on it, pulled from a lot of different libraries and stuff. And so I have a bunch of nice different keyboard shortcuts here. And I definitely like added a ton of different colors. And I added a lot of instructions in the command line tool there, so that way you can make yours look exactly like mine. There's a nice little project search setup that you can toggle different paste modes, change and delete surrounding characters. I love my Vim setup. I'm so glad that you guys liked it too. But yeah, you can check it out. Again, it's on my GitHub. Thank you. Wow, that made me happy. I love my Vim.
People want to see the dragon again too, apparently.
Oh. That is actually a variation of cow say. And so I make this thing called Wisdom show up.
We had
and pipe in color lolcat colors and then a thing called fortune. So that way every single time I do a new tab, it says something moderately wise from the dragon. So yeah, that's what that is.
There were a few questions as well about specifically using Vue.js over like CMS or over say something like React. Could you speak a little to that about like why you choose to use Vue.js over some of these other libraries?
Absolutely. So to be upfront, I actually use React a lot more than Vue.js, and that's just because that's more what I'm comfortable with. I'm still kind of very much learning Vue. I really like using Vue when I'm prototyping something really quickly. As you can see, we built this like nice little search engine in about a half hour, and you can really make a lot of things very quickly in Vue without having to do a lot of setup with components and lifecycle methods and all of that. Vue is very community based, and there's pros and cons to that. So when I use React, I use it for more, I don't want to say production level environments, but it's true. I use it for more client projects, for larger personal projects where I really want to make sure it is robust and nothing will really change. With Vue, because it's very community-based, some things do change. It is an open source project that isn't built by Facebook or some other large company like the other ones are. So for example, when I was first prepping this talk several months ago, there was a thing called Vue resource that I used for calling APIs. That doesn't exist anymore, and so I had to rewrite that part of the talk. And so, yeah, there's different things that are still kind of ebbing and flowing with Vue, and so that's why I tend to not use it for very large projects, but I do definitely use it for more rapid prototyping, and I do think that it has the potential to become a lot more popular over time. I know a lot of companies are starting to go towards it just because it is so lightweight and so fast. And so yeah, I think right now I'm still using it in the prototype phase, but we'll definitely use it for more production level environments later
on. Somebody wants to know if you had to build the same thing in Angular, how long would it take for comparison?
Oh, dang. So I am not very well versed in Angular. So for me, in Angular, it might take like an hour or two. In React, this would probably take me around the same time, but that's because I'm very comfortable with React. No, React might take a little bit longer. Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the setup. All of these kind of generally have the same, like there's this metric called speed to hello world. How many minutes does it take for you to get to a hello world portion? And a lot of them have libraries that get you started for that. So like, for example, if you use create React app, you could also build one of these types of search engine things very quickly because it sets up everything for you. And that's what Vue does for you too. I think Vue would probably increase my speed. I would say I can finish something in like 80% of the time as I would finish something in React. So it's a little faster, not insanely faster, but again, that is dependent on my own experience and it depends on your experience. But for a newbie who, if you're learning something from the ground up, I was able to learn Vue significantly faster than other frameworks because, again, everything is explicit. You can kind of just go up and running and the documentation is nice and simple and to the point, unlike that of other frameworks. So I think for an experienced person, you're going to get very similar results across the board. But for someone who's new to front-end frameworks, Vue will be definitely the fastest to get up and running.
And we had another question from Karthik who wanted to know if you could explain the difference between IndexJS and MainJS and what those are generally used for.
Sure. So this IndexJS, that is because it's in the router folder. And so it is the index of the router. And so that's why it's called that. It doesn't necessarily need to be called that, but it makes it easier for exporting because, again, it has this export default thing. That's kind of a style. You might see it a lot in React applications where they'll put an entire component folder in the components thing that has the whatever.js and index.js and then a style, and then everything points to the index. So the index just there is for easy exporting of the router. The main.js is where the actual magic happens for Vue itself. This actually initializes Vue and is kind of the entry point to the Vim or to the Vue application. And so that's the main difference. Main is for the whole application. Index is specific to that folder in
there. And we have another question that's sort of related to like this organizational process. But Flavio asks, what's the best way to isolate styles of components, in your opinion, specifically when dropping Vue into an existing HTML page? He's using Vue calendar widgets and is having some trouble keeping the styles more or less intact.
So again, if you scope your styles, that definitely makes it more specific to that. I've kind of been varying between projects on how I personally organize my CSS. A lot of people are going towards CSS modules, and then there's all kinds of frameworks out there, Zerb and stuff that kind of maintain those styles. I personally am very much a purist with CSS, and I don't like using too many crazy things unless I'm using a framework for nesting and variables or something. But I personally try to just keep every individual component style scoped, so that way it's just kind of specific to that, and then try to keep it organized that way. And then if you're talking about actually styling within each component, I kind of do the more position and spacing styles first, and then kind of go alphabetical after that. And then I kind of do things in order, very cascading, in order in which they appear on the page, unless I want certain things to be overridden. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if that was as specific or way too general as you wanted, but again, this style scope is definitely how I maintain my styles in Vue, just because you don't have to deal with making, again, in React, a whole separate folder that has your styles that are pointing specific to a JS file, or having a separate styles folder external from all of the components. These Vue templates are really nice for just having that natively within the framework.
Casimir wants to know if you have environment set up for Vue, or a specific folder structure between like front end versus like back end stuff.
So I don't have one on my computer right now that I can show you on this particular computer, but really, if for example you're using Django, let's just say, and you're serving an API with Django or a backend with Django, Django has like a static folder, and pretty much this entire build thing on the side here, that can just live inside that static folder, and everything can point inside of there. And so in terms of a backend, most backend frameworks, like Ruby on Rails or what is it called? There's Django, there's, names are escaping me right now. But anyway, with all these backend frameworks, they tend to have some kind of static pointing thing. I tend to put, again, an entire Vue.js application into one page on that, because again, with server-side rendering, these frameworks do allow you to make several different pages within their static content and serve up different things to the pages and do everything very back-end heavy. But again, I like the separation of concerns. And so I make just one existing page on the back-end side, and the back-end reads it as just one page. And Vue kind of handles the rest inside that page. Again, it all lives in the one div on the page. And that's kind of how I structure it. I hope that makes sense. But basically, undo that. But in like the giant ecosystem, this is all within one page of a static file in a backend.
And I have just a more general question for you. What's the like neatest thing that you've built in Vue as of late? Like obviously this GitHub search is up there, but I was just wondering like what's the neatest thing that you've been sort of playing with Vue?
Sure. So a lot of them I haven't actually pushed on GitHub yet, but I really like just messing with different APIs. And NASA has a ton of free APIs, which is awesome. And you can, again, I've built a little search engine for NASA to search for like images of the day. But you can also just track different positions within that, or different positions of like the ISS, the International Space Station, and cool things like that. I really like the data visualization side too. And so I've been kind of toying with, there's this framework I found, oh, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like Nexo or something, that just does a bunch of D3 visualizations. And because again, it's very easy to pull data from an API and parse it quickly with Vue, I've been able to kind of just take data and run with it, and stick it into like different graphs and stuff to visualize certain things. So I think the coolest things definitely are data visualizations for sure.
And just sort of to end on maybe some resources and stuff, if you have some questions about, in addition to like the Vue docs, like what's your preferred place for like additional tutorials and stuff? Like, are there any places that you go to, or things maybe that even you've written?
Sure. So if you're talking about things I've written, I definitely have a repo somewhere. That NASA search engine, let me find it really quick. That is a nice little demo there, which is very similar to what I just showed you today. And then also, if you talk to people like, or look on, what's it called, Twitter, to people like Wes Boss, anybody over at Smashing Magazine, Sarah Drasner, there's a bunch of really cool people on Twitter that are talking about Vue all the time. If you follow the Vue.js handle, there's always really cool things. And so I'll go to their Vue.js. Oh, it's not a dot. Pretty much anybody who follows this, who's being retweeted by this handle, is doing some really cool stuff. There's Sarah Drasner, who I mentioned, and she's doing exploring a bunch of data with serverless Vue.js. And so those people are very, very cool. And there's just, oh man, there's so many different people. It's hard for me to name them all. I'll have to tweet some of them. Oh yeah, Sean Larkin is really good at this. Look at the people who follow Vue.js, who tweet a lot about them, because if you really just follow the hashtags for it, you'll find a lot. Also, Egghead has a lot of really good tutorials. Yeah, again, I said Smashing Magazine before too. So Smashing Magazine and Egghead are kind of where I go for my tutorials outside of just hunting for the hashtag on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing us a little bit about Vue today and building something live, because that's always really good. I've done it, and I usually screw it up much more than would be preferable. So thank you so much for doing an amazing job today.
Yes,
yeah, we're so happy to have you.
Yes, thank you for having me. And anybody out there, definitely tweet me, and I'm happy to answer more questions about Vue. And also a quick shameless plug, I am working on a JavaScript class that I'm going to be releasing in November. So keep an eye out for that. You'll be able to learn a little bit more about it.
And just for those of you, like there were a few questions I just want to address. For those of you who were like curious, like how does Vue.js have anything to do with Shopify? It doesn't. We just want to make sure that our developers and people who are working with Shopify like have access to like really awesome resources like Cassidy here, and I think anything that levels up people's skill sets is really useful. So that's why we wanted to have you, because you're such a knowledgeable person, especially about the subject. So thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for having me. Thank you for having me, Shopify, and have a good rest of your week.